Hello and welcome to the LLG vlog. You're with me, Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor, and as usual, Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance. Now, how are you today?
Very well. It's nice and cool
Good,
today, so I'm happy.
good, good. Well, this will keep you happy, I think. Our subject this week seems at first sight to be rather boring, though. Written ministerial statements, the hot news. But far from it, at least for local government lawyers, because some of the most important announcements on local government review and governance in recent weeks have been found in the written ministerial statements that have been published by the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Yet these statements sometimes attract little publicity and can only be found in the murky corners of Hansard or the UK parliamentary website. Yet they contain some of the hottest news for us. During the month of June, ministers have issued three key announcements in relation just to governance.
That's right, Dennis. Let's go back to the start of the month, 5th of June.
Yeah.
Jim McMahon, the local government minister, set out the government's intention to permit local authorities to meet remotely, which was great, and to require them to develop their own remote attendance policies if they do. Now, local authorities, he said, vary in size, location, responsibility, and makeup. We want, he said, as in him and the government, to ensure that they can develop appropriately responsive policies. Now, on proxy voting, he said that they plan to require all principal. So here we're talking about unitaries, upper, second tier councils in England to implement proxy voting schemes to provide consistency for members who are absent when they become a new parent or for serious long-term illness. Then we move to the 23rd of June in the English Devolution White Paper. The government committed to establishing consistent and accountable structures across local government and said that they're considering which governance models available to local authorities will best support their decision-making processes and will provide more detail on this shortly. So what happened then?
Yeah, well, hot on the heels of that one, the 24th of June, McMahon said the government plans to legislate to abolish the committee system, requiring those councils currently operating this model to transition to the leader and cabinet model. This will simplify, he said, the governance system, although that is controversial. And he says it will ensure all councils operate an executive form of governance, providing clarity on responsibility and accountability and improving efficiency in decision-making, so he said. And it was also announced that mayoralties are no longer in vogue. So really, Helen, our main point today is this. What are written ministerial statements and what is their effect? How do government now use these statements? And what impact have these particular written statements had? So these are the things we will examine today. So first, the nature of those written ministerial statements, Helen.
Yeah, I took a look at this because, up till now, I've just sort of received a ministerial statement and sort of dealt with the information contained within it. But so it's an interesting one. If a government wants to quickly influence, I would say, and direct a change in policy, perhaps clarify ambiguity, set new priorities, or reinforce existing policies, they need look no further than issuing a written ministerial statement. I understand they're known in Parliament as WMS. Now, it's an official document. It is an official document issued by a government minister to inform Parliament and the public about a specific matter of policy or government activity or some other significant issue. It's important to note, however, that they do bypass the chamber. And it is an extremely powerful and effective tool when it comes to local government or planning or planning matters, two areas at the centre of the government's drive, as we know, for prosperity and more social housing. I'll wrap this up by saying that it comes directly from ministers representing the official stance from government. It carries significant weight and can shape legislative proposals as they emerge. So they're important influencing statements, Dennis.
Indeed, indeed. And the question, so how are written ministerial statements being used? Well, you mentioned planning there. Planning is a good example of the determination of the Labour government to drive change via ministerial statements. And of course, local government procedures and governance are integral to this mission. In October 2023, the party stated that upon entering office, the now Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, Angela Rayner, would publish a written ministerial statement and write to all chief planning officers to instruct local planning authorities to approve planning applications in areas which do not have a local plan, and added that the WMS would also signpost changes to the National Planning Policy Framework.
Yeah, and clearly, as we've seen in relation to local government reorganisation, Dennis, the government has adopted a similar determination to use this statement with 3 examples during June alone. And in government, by looking at past uses of Labour's future plans, it's clear that ministerial statements, I believe, will continue to play a role in shaping government reorganisation and the governance agenda, acting both as well, it seems a rapid response mechanism and a precursor to more legislative reforms. I think the statements do provide an authoritative direction, don't they, ahead of draft legislation coming forward, and they seem to be providing the rationale for that emerging legislation. In the case of remote meetings and proxy voting, the statement did follow a consultation and government response. But from your vast experience, Dennis, have written ministerial statements sort of always been published this way and for the same reasons, would you say?
Well, not quite. Written ministerial statements were normally used to put the day-to-day business of government on the official record and in the public domain. Written ministerial statements are often used, or were often used, to provide or announce detailed information and statistics from government, that sort of thing, the publication of reports by government agencies, findings of reviews and inquiries and the government's response to those, and perhaps, relatively boring financial and statistical information, so not quite as they're used now. And I did do some research on this, and up until 2002, the government mainly used written answers to make statements by getting a backbench MP to table a written question drafted by the government department. Now, the need for these arranged or planted questions was removed in October 2002 when a new system allowing written ministerial statements to be printed independently in Hansard, and this was introduced into the Commons as well. But that was the history, but back to the 3 written ministerial statements this June from Jim McMahon. What do we think the impact has been on all of these?
Well, there's a lot of detail in the bulletins that we've issued out, and we've already looked at the remote meeting response already. I think what occurs to me is this: June's been absolutely hectic, hasn't it?
It's a roller coaster.
And it keeps going. As if the 3 major changes of reorganisation, devolution, and financial reform weren't enough for anyone to focus on. There was more to come following the launch of a fair funding review 2.0 consultation, I'll say it like that. The minister announced another sea change, this time across local authority governance. The government outlined plans to introduce legislation to ban the committee system and prevent the establishment of directly elected local authority mayors, although we're keeping the 13 that are in existence. I think you have to ask the question, what's the cumulative impact of all these changes coming in simultaneously as they are? It does seem like the government's in a hurry to get the governance foundations set out before local government review changes are fully implemented, not just governance, but changes to the finance system. There's one area we haven't mentioned yet, and that's member standards. Potentially there'll be something soon. I kind of hope so. We've been pushing for that a long time, Dennis. But I suppose, my question would be, what's next?
Well, yes. Well, we don't know really, but each of the 3 written ministerial statements carries that ministerial weight that you rightly described earlier and indicate the direction of travel of government policy. And they presage forthcoming draft legislation to give effect to the proposals that each of them contains. Surprisingly, however, the draft legislation on committee system abolition as we were discussing last week, came just hours after the ministerial statement, didn't it?
It was very
And
quick.
perhaps it's that particular statement, Helen, that has generated the greatest controversy.
Mm. Well, I mean, it was just completely unexpected. I think it really took the sector by surprise. It's caused a stir. Nobody saw it coming. There are 38 committee system and local authorities in England at the moment. And I would say that the ending of the new moralities, Freudian slip.
Moralities.
Yes. It's raised far more questions than answers. And there's actually, interestingly, I was holding a session with our work experience students last week, and I was explaining about the 13 mayors in terms of structures of local authorities. And then it occurred to me that I had to explain to them that it wasn't the hat wearing, opening ribbons mayors that they might be familiar with. So I can see that it's confusing to the public.
Yes, the concept of an executive mayor as opposed to the front of house mayor is something that's lost on a lot of people, I think, isn't it? A bit of history, perhaps, I can give you now on these committees, and I think it is a highly controversial issue that's been announced on this. It's 190 years since they effectively came into being under the Municipal Corporations Act of 1835, legislation we talk about here at LLG all of the time, and 25 years after its death warrant was first mooted during the 1990s when government was contemplating the removal of the committee system before the changes that came in 2000. And the ministerial statement, Helen, has some very strong words to say about the committee system that echo the blistering critiques to which it was subjected to in the 1990s. And I think perhaps unfairly, I've worked under the committee system and I don't recognise some of the things that are mentioned here. But according to the government, the committee system can be unclear, duplicative and wasteful, leading to slower, less efficient decision making. And a number of people in the sector would disagree, and ADSO, and we've discussed this, have asked for greater transparency around the evidence base informing this judgment. I'll be fascinated to see how the government respond to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've made some strong statements. Where's that coming from? You know, because there are plenty of individuals working in the committee system who would say it works really well. So yeah, let's see how they do respond to that. But I think it's also worth noting the minister's language on directly elected mayors actually as well, because here he says that the government recognises that there are several directly elected local council mayors currently in place. I've just mentioned. We proposed, he says, to accept the continuation of the 13 legacy, referred to as legacy directly elected council mayors, whilst introducing measures to ensure a more consistent approach by not facilitating the creation of new ones. Interesting. So this will pose important questions for places who are using the mayoral system, including London, of course, where there are several in advance of elections next year. Will those councils take the opportunity to have a shot of what will now be known as legacy mayors, or will current and new incumbents, you know, guard their positions? Who knows?
Just another interesting point, Helen. I'm looking back at those words about the committee system. Are we to assume then that the government has as a view and a conclusion that the mayor and cabinet and the leader and cabinet systems are all clear, don't have duplication, are not wasteful, never slow, and never less efficient than the committee system? I just wonder. I think some of the views expressed have been rather harsh on the committee system, frankly.
Well, we will, of course, report further, I think, when we've got draft legislations brought forward and all these matters unfold, Dennis.
Yep.
And that's a good note, I think, to wrap up.
Yeah, let's see what happens next. And we'll include all updates and more WMSs in our future bulletins, future podcasts, and vlogs, of course. And if you have a view on any of the things that we've discussed today, you know what I'm going to say now? Don't hesitate to get in touch with us through the forum on our LLG website. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Nice chatting, Dennis.
And to you as well. Bye.